Thank you for joining me today. I am Jarrell. Today I will be discussing a topic which is extremely important that game developers understand, especially if you are early on in your journey and you are building your ability to build concepts for games. So the topic I want to describe is prioritizing vibe over gameplay. Vibe over gameplay. What does that mean? Well, the gameplay can be described as the mechanical systems through which the player interacts with the game. Again, the gameplay is the mechanical systems through which the player interacts with the game, and the vibe is the feeling that the player experiences through playing the game. That is the feeling the player experiences through playing the game. The game that I will be taking a look at is one of my games that I published. It first launched exclusively on the Nintendo 3DS and was later ported to the Wii U. So another element that is extremely important, people will probably say this is one of the more important elements because it is so visible, are the graphics. These are the visual elements which communicate the current state of game logic. So when it comes to prioritizing vibe over gameplay, and I'll be using this game, which is called Silver Falls Undertakers. I'll be using this as an example. I'm currently running this in a web browser instead of having it be run on a 3DS or a Wii U. So when it comes to gameplay, I will bring up example one is prioritizing gameplay over vibe. Example one, the player must press the A button to beat the game. There is no timing that is required. The player doesn't need to have good spacing. Nothing else matters. All the player has to do is press the A button, and then they win the game. Technically, it's smooth gameplay. Nothing gets in the way. The gameplay is basically perfect. Nothing can go wrong. The problem is the vibe sucks because there's nothing interesting about it. Example number two is a walking simulator where the graphics and music are stunning, but there's no combat, there's no level up system, there's no items or equipment, and there's no way to fail. All you do is walk. So that is an example where it is the vibe that matters. The vibe is good, but now the gameplay sucks because there's nothing good about it. So today we'll discuss this topic with Silver Falls Undertakers. I will put the link in the description to this so you can play this. This is the first time that this has been made available for free. In the past, you had to purchase the game on either the 3DS or the Wii U. This is the full story mode of the game, but it is missing the other modes of the game. That would have taken significantly more time for me to make available on the PC, as the controls for the other game modes play differently and they require more buttons, and I didn't have time to create a button scheme for the keyboard because I know that people like to customize their inputs and use different controllers. So this is a version where you can play through the story mode in the web browser. So this is the point that I want to make with this video, and I hope that I will be able to make the point clear. If you cannot make an interesting game with simple graphics, then you cannot make an interesting game with complex graphics. I'll say it again. If you cannot make an interesting game with simple graphics, you cannot make an interesting game with complex graphics. The first console title that I shipped was titled Silver Falls 3 Down Stars. It is exclusive to the 3DS. It had complex visuals and gameplay. It was a survival horror that had a massive battle mode that had tons of RPG elements, massive amounts of loot drops and skills and customizing, heaps of different alternate outfits for characters. It was a huge amount of work went into it, and it is a game that I'm extremely proud of. But I knew that after doing 3 Down Stars, I needed to refine my skill and my understanding of games, so I created Silver Falls Undertakers. And in this game, I wanted to focus on creating an interesting experience and an interesting game without relying on complex graphics. So I pared away anything that wasn't related to the core experience of it being something that you interact with. So I want to briefly discuss the topic of evocation. This is something that applies to any form of art, any form of creation. Evocation in this situation, it is the act of referencing or expressing a shared cultural memory or topic, whether that is by using a certain color scheme or using visuals that look like they come out of the 80s. I want to explain how evocation is used in Undertakers. With Undertakers, I attempted to style match games from the 70s and 80s, and I wanted to evoke that era of gaming. Players who grew up with the games from the 70s and 80s, they will subconsciously have their mindset set to that reference point in their life. If you grew up with these, when you see these visuals, when you interact with the game this way, you're just subconsciously, your mindset is set to that reference point. And that is organic storytelling. That is evocation. And it's something that's really special and only works because we have some shared history in some way. People who did not grow up with that era of games, when they see an environment like this, because it's so different, they may feel alienated and they'll feel a bit like a fish out of water, and they'll feel less comfortable in this environment. And in this situation, that is intended because it's all part of organic storytelling. So how I stripped back the mechanics and the music in this game, they all contribute to a sense of loneliness and powerlessness because we're accustomed to so much strong stimulation in games now. We are accustomed to seeing so much music and all these flashy graphics and particle effects. So I stripped all of those away. And that is what builds this core experience. You are only able to carry one item at a time, and it's generally used for puzzle solving or logical progression. You're not really able to fight back. There is a different game mode where it's all about combat and getting a high score, but that is not included in the free online version here. Because you can't really fight back, you're quite vulnerable, and that is part of the vibe. You make the player feel like, it feels like they have an item, they can pick up a gun, they can pick up a stick. It feels like they should be able to fight back, but no matter what they do, it's not enough to deal with the enemies. It's not enough to deal with the threats, and that's all intentional. It's part of the vibe. Something that I focused on when creating this game is the relationship between the player and the game. Now, what do I mean by the relationship between the player and the game? This is something extremely important, and I really hope that people consider this when they are creating the concepts for their games, because it's something that I don't see paid any attention to at all when it comes to many modern games that have huge budgets and AAA titles. They tend to just focus on graphics and flashiness. So the relationship between the player and the game. In an example would be, in modern games, we have autosave, and because the game is constantly saving progress for the player doesn't have any reason to remember anything about the game. The player isn't rewarded, nor are they required to remember what they've done or where things are. And that means that the game is really asking you to be disconnected from it. It's not asking you to form a connection. Modern games use mini-maps and pointers for items and objective places, so players don't need to search out where the items are. They don't need to find where their objectives are. They're just told where they are through pointers on a map. So this means that the player has no reason to pay attention to the environment. With Undertakers, I did everything opposite from modern games, and I did that with intent. For me, it was an exercise to see, how can I understand games better? How can I use the very core concepts of what makes a game interesting and exciting? How can I use that and build an experience with just the very basic building blocks? So while style matching games from the 70s and 80s, I built this game hoping to achieve that. Over the years, people have messaged me and told me that they enjoy the game, but they're asking why there isn't a save file system for the story mode. And I know it sounds kind of funny, like a tagline, but I always told people the save file is in your heart. And what I mean by that is that's how it was with games in the 70s and 80s. There were no save files, at least in the early 80s. So that means that you had to build a relationship with the game. You formed a connection. The game was saying to you, form a connection, because you had to remember where things were. And the more that you remembered where things were, the faster you could beat story mode, the better you would be at navigating the environments. And that's what I mean is the save file is in your heart. And because of that, you give the player an organic reason to care about the game. Now, here is an example of where the vibe can go wrong. This guy's going to get me. He got me. So in my first console title is Silver Falls 3 Down Stars. It is a survival horror with a over-the-shoulder third-person camera. Now, in 3 Down Stars, the weapons handling is sloppy on purpose, and it lacks mechanical precision. And that is on purpose to make the player feel vulnerable and to organically communicate that these characters are just normal humans. They are not video game characters who have perfect mechanics. They're just vulnerable people. And when it comes to horror, it is extremely important for effective horror. You must not let the player feel like they can comfortably defeat the threats. If the player feels like they can just shoot an enemy, then those enemies no longer feel threatening and the horror is gone. He got me. He got me. So I received backlash when it came to 3 Down Stars because people saw the third-person camera and they expected the game to handle like a third-person shooter with tight shooting controls and fluid combat. And so that is a situation where prioritizing vibe over gameplay worked against the game, and that it resulted in people having a negative reaction to it. But by the end of the 3DS lifespan, there was a significantly larger number of people who eventually understood what I was going for with 3 Down Stars, and they realized that the game was actually designed to take that into account, because there are significantly more practical weapons for different situations and dozens of weapon options. So there are enemies that just move so fast that aiming feels frustrating and difficult. And that, again, is because I was trying to focus on the feeling that the player experiences. We have something called logical expectation. This is something that I will explain more in the future. An example of logical expectation is if you are in a building and you see an exit sign, you expect the door to lead to the exit of the building. If you see an exit sign and a door and it leads to a bathroom, it's pretty upsetting, isn't it? Because it's not what you were expecting. And that is how vibe over gameplay can go wrong. So as a developer, you need to explore these concepts, you need to experiment, you need to try these things so you can gain an understanding of how to use those concepts to your benefit. With Silver Falls Undertakers, I strip away all the modern mechanics. I focus entirely on the vibe. It is entirely 100% vibe over gameplay, and I think this is probably one of the only times I will make a game like this where it's entirely vibe over gameplay. I just wanted to focus on storytelling and creating an experience that makes the player feel connected to the characters in the story. With the Silver Falls games, they focus on the feeling. All those Silver Falls games are always about the feeling, and that is, what is the player experiencing? The feeling that the player experiences is the primary objective always with my Silver Falls games, and that means that I sacrifice other aspects to achieve that result, and it's not unintentional. It's not, oh, I accidentally made the game feel bad. I do it on purpose so I can elicit a feeling, and I tend to do that to try and get the player to feel the way that the characters feel in the story. If there's a sense of hopelessness or frustration, feeling lost, feeling like there's no direction, not sure what to do with the game, in general, I sacrifice gameplay elements to get that effect. And I'm so fortunate that I have supporters who understood what I've done, and they appreciate that, and they really enjoy the games for what they set out to do. But you have to be very careful when you take an approach like this, because you will be missing out on the mass appeal that you really need in order for a game to sell well. So I'm trying to show you here, you might see I'm getting abducted by these creatures called the Undertakers, but these are actually, it seems like, oh, they're an inconvenience, but what is actually going on, what I planned while I was creating this game, is that each Undertaker only takes you to one specific spot, and they tend to inhabit a particular area. So the Undertakers, they seem like they're this enemy that ruins your day, but from a gameplay standpoint, mechanically, they are also a form of fast travel, because if you know which Undertakers take you to which places, it can actually make the game faster to get through, and that's part of sort of memorizing where things are, and it builds a sense of reward when you know where things are. And it does actually help, because you can see other elements in the environment. You might find or you might see items that you would want to pick up later on here. So something that I have to put an immense amount of effort in are the character designs for the Silver Falls characters. These characters appear across different games, across different platforms. I've created games on different platforms, Game Boy Color, Pokemon Mini. I need to make sure that these characters are identifiable and you can tell who they are basically immediately. The way that I achieve this is generally through the use of identifiable color palettes. These are two characters that just seem like they're random NPCs, but if you are familiar with the other Silver Falls games, when you see these color schemes, you see these two characters next to each other, you might be able to put two and two together and identify, oh, wait a second, I know who these two characters are. My Silver Falls games use a mechanism that allows you to connect all of the games together regardless of what platform they are on. I'm also working on a Silver Falls novel, which actually can connect through the games, and it can take a character from the novel and make them playable in the Silver Falls games. This character is playable in other Silver Falls games when you connect them all together. So if you would like to check out my other games, this is what I consider a vibe check, that people can try this and they can see whether they like the vibe of Silver Falls or not. All the games come around in different price ranges. Some games are bigger and more complex, and others are a little bit simpler, like this one. If you would also like to try a game that's a bit more mechanically robust, you can check out Silver Falls Galaxy Bound Curse, which is an action RPG. It's available for free on my itch.io page. It is a Game Boy ROM. I'm still making updates and refining that. And I do also have Silver Falls games. They're all available on the Nintendo Switch. They're on sale right now if you would like to check those out. But please, I humbly ask, please don't just buy the games because you enjoy my videos and you want to support my videos. I don't want you to buy the games just to support me that way. I would much rather you spend your money that you have for games, your budget. I would rather you spend it on a game that you really, really like, because I've created these games knowing that they don't have mass appeal, but they achieve exactly what I set out to do with them, and that's to focus on story, characters, and vibe. So try this one, see if you like the vibe, and then try Galaxy Bound Curse. Again, that's a free Game Boy game. You can play that however you like. That's available. I'll put the link in the description below. If you like the vibe, then there's a pretty decent chance that you will like my Silver Falls games on the Switch. They're different genres, they're all different kinds, and they all contribute to telling a story, and that's really what it's all about with these sort of games. So I hope this has been interesting to you. Please let me know if this information was useful or clear to you, and if you think it will help you as you plan your games, or if you are not into game development, but you are a gamer and this has been interesting to you, please let me know. And I hope that you will check in for my next videos, where hopefully the things that I order on the internet will look cool instead of looking like He-Man wigs. Take care of yourselves. Be well. Thanks again to everyone who's been hanging out with me in the comments section. It's been a lot of fun. You guys are you're really making me laugh with the comment section. It's so cool just hanging out with you guys there. And special thanks to the Patreon supporters. I really appreciate you guys. I hopefully after this month we'll be able to spend some time a little bit more on some homebrew. October is coming up, and I sure do love Halloween in October, so hopefully I can have a new homebrew game out for everyone to enjoy and just have fun with by the time October rolls around. Thanks very much, everyone, and please feel free to check out those games on the Nintendo Switch eShop if you would like. And I will be bringing games to Steam very soon as well. Take care. Thank you for watching.